Should I go for bigger drives or should I go for bigger NAS? If that's the question, then watch this video. Because there could be two situations. Either you have an existing NAS, like 2 bay for example, or maybe 4 bay, and those disks are filled up, you run out of space, and you need to figure out how to gain some more storage space. So the options are there to either upgrade those disks inside with bigger ones, or you go for a bigger NAS like 4 bay or 8 bay. There are two options. So we're gonna go through all the options, what you could do, because either you have existing NAS or maybe you're gonna buy your first NAS and you don't want to make a mistake by getting a 2 bay. You want to decide between 2 bay or 4 bay in the first place. So we're gonna go through the slides and try to understand what the advantages are of having more bays and what the advantages are having fewer bays. So let's focus on going for bigger drives first. So if you want to go for bigger drives, in your existing NAS is probably going to be cheaper, because all you need to invest in is your media, bigger drives. So that would cost you less than getting a new NAS, because new NAS will definitely cost you slightly more. Even though in the future, in regards future proofing, it might be actually cheaper to have more bays. The second thing is power consumption. Running 2 drives and 1 motherboard and one CPU will cost you less in the long run compared to having a NAS, which is a 4 bay or 8 bay, where you need to run all of the drives inside. You need to run bigger CPU and other things like maybe even cards and things like that. So that's the power consumption. That's the other thing. And another thing is mirroring. Maybe for data safety reasons you want mirroring instead of striping. Well, instead of having a RAID 5 for example, because 2 drive mirror means that everything what is on the drive 1 is going to be mirrored on drive 2. So whenever one or another drive fails, you don't need to think much about recovering. It's very easy to recover RAID, which is mirror, because you'll find the same data on both drives. With RAID 5, recovering is slightly more difficult. So you may need to get a software which can actually read off the RAID 5, which means reading from 3 drives straight away, or 4 drives. And the last thing, why would you choose upgrading drives instead of NAS, would be noise, because bigger NASs, as you see, got 2 fans, so it's going to generate more noise, and also more drives. Every drive generates around a certain amount of noise. So when you add up one to another, all of them, they come together and generate like significant noise, and not just noise, also vibrations. So these are the things why you would probably want to stick with upgrading drives only instead of NAS. But let's talk about upgrading NAS with slightly more bays. So the first thing is that you will reduce the costs per terabyte, because if you add more drives, it will cost you less, because for example, in this example is 2 times 8 terabyte drives. Each of them would cost £200, which brings total cost of £400, which is £50 per terabyte. If you go for 3 drives, so if you go for 4 bay and put only 3 drives in there, say this is a RAID 5 or SHR1, that will cost you £37. That's a significant discount already. It's cheaper, so you have saved £100 and having the same storage capacity. Of course, you need to add NAS cost as well, because bigger NAS will cost you probably £100 more, or maybe more. And the third thing is, if you add 4 drives, you can see that price has reduced already down to £35 per terabyte. That's the first thing, price per terabyte. Second thing, you may actually want to have certain RAID levels. So you, instead of having RAID 1, you want to have RAID 10, which means that you have 2 RAID 1s. So you're mirroring first 2 drives with second 2 drives. So you still have sort of the RAID 1 option, but you gain speeds massively, because that's what video editors will always go for, RAID 10. They got redundancy and they got speed, two things altogether. And you can, as you can see in the table underneath, that you get different speeds from different RAIDs. So RAID 6 will be also slower than RAID 5. So you may go for RAID 10 or RAID even 50, and as more bays you get, more drives you get. So this could be an option. Also, Synology put RAID 1 times 3 means that you may want to have not only 2 copies, but you want to have 3 copies. Synology allows you to have RAID 1 across 3 drives if you want to, or 4. So it means mirroring every drive. So you have capacity of 1 drive, but you have these copies. Not as a RAID, you have actual mirrored copies on NAS. That's why people might want to have this if they're running some sort of a company which is with sensitive data like lawyers, medical records and things like that. You want safety, you never want to lose your data. Of course, it's better to do backups and stuff like that, but one of the things to consider. Next thing, they may want to reuse old NAS for backing up. So if you get a new NAS, you can use your old NAS somewhere in the basement, somewhere in your relative houses, somewhere remotely, and you can set up automated synchronization sort of task, which means that all data will be synchronized to this remote location, so you're protected against like fire, flood, burglars breaking into a house, taking stuff. That's the thing, backup. Another thing would be high availability. It means if you get 2 NASes, 2 plus series NASes next to each other, it means that you can set the situation that if one NAS just breaks down, power supply, power whatever cable, both drives, the other NAS will take over instantly. Maybe not instantly, 30 seconds, but it will take over, and users can still connect and push their data forwards and backwards and keep on using the NAS even though the main NAS just died. So that could be an option. Next thing, separate RAID or volume, because with a 2-bay you can have RAID 1 or RAID 0 or single disks option. But if you want to have, for example, 2 separate RAIDs, like if you have a 4-bay, you can have RAID 5 on 3 drives and 1 as a single drive, or 2 RAID 1s. Why would you do that? That means that you can dedicate 1 RAID for, let's say, surveillance, because surveillance is going to all the time be writing some sort of data on disks and keeping them busy. So other people trying to put some data on those same disks might not get the same performance as they should. So if you separate those disks into 2 RAIDs, or even 2 LANs, these 2 sort of departments can have uninterrupted service. That's the way of doing things. Next thing, bigger NAS for caching, because not always you're gonna fill all of the bays. So you can, for example, say let's put two disks, 2 bays filled with disks, and you can use SSDs in other 2, or just 1 SSD. And therefore, if you don't have M.2 caching slot or PCIe slot for SSD caching upgrades, you can use 3.5 inch bays for caching. Put in 2.5 inch SSDs, enable cache, that's it, sorted. Moving on, hot spares. You may want to use one of the bays for hot spare. It means that if one of the drives fail, if you have, for example, RAID 5 and you don't want to have RAID 6, you want RAID 5, you keep 1 drive spare unallocated. It's like separate disk, just waiting for one of these 3 disks to fail. So one of those disks, when they fail, that disk automatically takes the place. It's rebuilding a RAID automatically in the background, and you keep on going. That could be the reason why would you do that. Empty bays for future proofing. For example, you need something like maybe 10 terabytes of data, 8 terabytes of data as today, but you know that in the future your data needs will grow up to 20 or 40 terabytes. So to not waste your money on electricity, you can start with just fewer drives, get 10 or maximum you can get from those bays, and then add more drives as you go later on. Especially if you got Synology, you can even mix different capacity drives. You started with 4 terabyte drives, you can add some 8 terabyte drives and 16 terabyte drives as you go, and that's the way of avoiding to a need for expansion unit, because lots of people don't trust expansion units because there's a cable involved and extra power supply and extra things, and they rather have a bigger NAS and add drives as they go. And another thing is speed and IOPS. More drives you get, more IOPS you will get, because instead of writing to 1 or 2 disks at the same time, you can write at 4 disks, 6, 8 disks at a time, or read from 8 disks at the same time. So that increases how quickly you can get response from the NAS. And not just the IOPS, how quickly you can, also how fast you can transfer these data forwards and backwards as well. That's another thing. And one more thing is better hardware, because usually when you go for bigger NASs, you'll get better CPUs, which means more cores, better support for RAID configuration, PCIe upgrade cards. You also will get often support for NVMe. Bigger boxes will have NVMe slot as a M2 or through PCIe. The PCIe lanes themselves, even when you got M2 cache, you will see a difference between, for example, 720, which is 2-bay NAS, which could have also NVMe slot, but this NVMe slot will be, for example, X2, which means 500 megabytes a second, whereas 1821 or 1621 will have NVMe slot as well, which is times 4, much faster already connection. So you'll get faster cache with a bigger NAS. And of course, you'll put the cards in like 10 gigabit, 25 gigabit, or even faster cards. So these are the things you can do. And this is a summary of all things we were just talking about, if you want to recall all of these things. I hope this video was helpful. If you got questions, as always, go to NAS Compares, fill the form, send email to info.nascompares. We'll shoot video like this and help others too. Cheerio.